Ladies and gentlemen, on days like today, it just looks like South Africa's political retardation is near complete. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Man, it's tiring dealing with South African news. Like, hit the bell icon, subscribe to the channel, and if you really want to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So before we get on to the news articles of today, actually I want to draw your attention to the excellent, and I do mean excellent, podcast that Rabbi Goldstein, the chief rabbi of South Africa, did with Cornier. And during this podcast, he basically asked him what the current state of play was in terms of South Africa's politics. And the key message was that pressure being exerted against the ANC will, in the long term, make a difference. And so everything that we do at the moment is designed to put pressure on the ANC. So let's look at some of the key highlights of the messaging that he gave. When he said that the elites are telling us this, but the reality on the ground floor is this. He said that the ANC as a party was at odds with the reality of its own voters. And he went on to actually explain what he meant by that. But before we go on to that, I must say that this actually is 100% correct. The lived experience of the majority of people is not what the legacy media and the ANC tell us. They all tell us that we all hate each other and black on white violence has never been worse, but that's not the lived experience of most people. In fact, if you were to believe the media, all black people enjoy singing "Kill the Boer," and they really want to kill lots of Boers. But according to Cornier, that's not actually true. He said when he polled black people specifically, he found that 80% of black people felt that it was harmful to sing "Kill the Boer." Specifically, and even more interestingly, that figure was representative even inside the EFF, which showed you that the EFF itself, while singing the song, didn't actually have the support en masse to sing the song that it thought it would. And that in itself is an example of political parties being at odds with their voters. Interestingly enough, he said in terms of black individuals that were surveyed, only 20% of them actually supported EWC, expropriation without compensation. And the rationality for that, on why such a small amount of individuals supported it, was that no one trusted the ANC with it. And to that I say 100% correct. None of us do trust them with it. He also said that this is where the actual things become interesting, you see, because what the ANC fails to understand is the aspirations of the voters as opposed to the lived experience, with many individuals actually aspiring to own property, even if they don't. Now, where this becomes also interesting is that according to the latest government statistics, and we've seen this in the propaganda media, a large portion of South Africa's farmland is still owned by Boers, white Afrikaners. But the reality, according to Cornier, is that this is actually untrue, because he suggests that around 50% of agricultural land might not be owned by black individuals, but they are actually in black possession. And that is because black ownership is not being granted to them underneath the usury rights given by the state. In other words, the state leases it to them, but they don't actually get to own it. And yes, this is correct. Now, according to France, those actual land statistics aren't counted when it comes through to ownership patterns. So basically, yes, it's 100% propaganda by the national. It's 100% propaganda by the legacy media. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because according to Cornier, only 20% of the ANC's voters actually think that employment equity is a good thing, with 70% suggesting that merit-based appointments are the best way to hire, which again, we all agree with. And the reason that there seems to be a disconnect between the figures that he's saying and the actual opinions of those on the ground floor appear to be, as he says, that the ANC just does not understand the aspirations of its voter base. Instead, what the ANC appears to want to do is just give them junk, give them things that they don't actually want. According to Cornier, everybody aspires to get what the middle or higher income earners have, whether it be private medical or a property or whatever else. What they don't want to do is have those individuals reduced to poverty so that everybody is living in a poverty state overall. Now, this is also symbolized in the ANC's attempt to increase VAT. Meant that, according to Franz Cornier, their support was now in the 30s, with support cratering. And this as a whole was an example of the ANC going against the aspirations of its supporters. Now, Franz says when you take this data overall and you start applying it to the ANC, what it actually shows you is that the reason the ANC lost the election was because the ANC's voter base was actually motivated by their material circumstances. In other words, they would look around and go, well, this is rubbish, and they moved away from the political party. Now, Franz Cornier does say that for those of you who watch this, this looks like political chaos. But what it's not is political violence. And he says that if you actually look in a number of countries around Africa, a lot of political change ends up occurring by political violence, which is not where South Africa currently is. And so he says that actually, if you look at South Africa, overall, the voter base is moderately centre. And that if the ANC actually wishes to improve its fortunes in life, it would start to capture the aspirations of the emerging voter rather than suppressing the already actualized voter and basically making them lower class. Because it's the aspirant voter, the person who wants a better life. If they can grant that better life to that individual, that's the person who's going to vote for the ANC. All of this makes sense. So what's his proof of this? He says, well, an actual figure that isn't really talked about much is that actually in the last election, over half of the DA's voters were not white. And it was because they saw the DA being a party of the middle class, and they wanted to become middle class, and that middle class represents their aspirations, hence they voted for it. Now, according to Franz Cornier, whilst the GNU has been classed as overall positive of the country, it's not actually increased investor confidence, which remains at around 15%. In order for us to get good economic growth, we actually need around 25% investor confidence. So why is it that investor confidence remains low? And according to Franz, that's, well, we might actually have a new GNU, but all the old policies, the stuff that make it very negative for businesses to actually invest here, they're still there. And actually, whilst they continue to be there, what this is likely to see is that it's likely to see the ANC support continue to be eroded to the point where he predicts that come the next elections, if nothing changes, ANC is basically going to be a footnote in history. So for those of you who are looking at things at the moment and going, yeah, things look bad, well, things are only going to look bad for a while, and then the ANC is no more. Now, according to France, if South Africa was really smart, it would be adopting a very practical approach with Donald Trump, because what South Africa needs to thrive is to burn a lot of coal, because there is no viable option to get a green alternative in the next 15 to 20 years. And so actually, realistically, if we wanted to reburn coal, the best person to go to would be, well, Trump, because he would allow it. Keep all of this in mind, because excellent observations. And with that all being said, let's get into the news today and apply some of the insights that we've just learned from Franz Cornier. And first, this actually is in relation to the Employment Equity Amendment Act, which, as you all know, is currently in the courts with DA. One of the very things that, as we can see, is not very popular with the voter base. Well, according to the media now, yep, even the media is writing this is likely to backfire on the ANC, because what it's showing is that it's alienating the middle class and alienating business, which means it's reducing investor confidence. And according to Ibrahim Harvey of Propaganda 24, what we've noticing with this is that it's likely to cause, well, job losses, which is going to backfire against the ANC. So I guess Franz was 100% correct. And it's very nice to see that the propaganda media is now catching on to these ideas and noticing the very thing that the rest of us have been saying for some time. By doing bean countering, you're not going to create jobs. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to reduce investor confidence and you will shed jobs. And this will ultimately lead to the shedding of the vote of the ANC. Now, why this also becomes interesting is because, as Franz Cornier said, putting pressure on the governing party is exactly what you need to do. And putting pressure on the governing party is exactly what the DA is doing. They've taken the ANC to court over the Employment Equity Act, and now, Panyaza Lesufi, never been known to be the sharpest tool in the toolbox, has come out and said that actually this means the DA is an enemy of the ANC because it's anti-transformational and anti the aspirations of the working class. And the DA's suggestion that by adopting the act would mean that unskilled black individuals would be promoted to roles that they're unqualified to fulfill was just flawed. But here's the thing, bud. Like, if they were able to do these jobs right now, on the basis of meritocracy, they'd have the jobs. That's the reality. What you can't suggest is that the only reason that these people don't have these jobs is that some manager was like, no, I'm not promoting Temple because Temple's black. I'm going to promote Fred because he's white. Those conversations don't happen. This is what the ANC doesn't seem to understand. It's not 1950 anymore. And the reality of what the DA is attempting to do with the act is to promote the best individuals to get the job. And that may not always be Temple. Sometimes it might be Fred. And other times it might be Temple. And this is the point. Now, the interesting argument by him is that he suggests that the only basis of appointments at the moment is the color of your skin. Now, again, do you not hear yourself talking? Because what you're saying is that the only basis for appointment at the moment is the color of your skin, ergo the way to remedy it is to do appointments based on your color of your skin. This is stupid. You people are retarded. Now, talking of absolute retarded, let's now go on to obviously the other pressures being put on South Africa via the US suggestion that genocide is occurring in South Africa. And I must admit, I've never seen the government do one of these. A government message, which I must be honest, would actually not look that far out when it comes through to George Orwell's vision of a country. Anyway, they actually had this to say about the genocide.
No genocide in South Africa. Government committed to constitutional principles. These are your government messages for the day. I am Nonkululeko Mtshali. Government calls on South Africans to unite behind our nation in this period of misinformation aimed at misrepresenting our great country. South Africa is a democratic country committed to respecting human rights, including human dignity and equality. Government respects the right to freedom of movement and will not hinder citizens who choose to leave the country. However, the resettling of Afrikaner South Africans in the United States as refugees is based on inaccuracies and misinformation. The government affirms that the allegations of discrimination and persecution are unfounded. South Africa is open to constructive dialogue with the United States and any aggrieved party to share better and common understanding over these matters. South Africa remains committed to non-racialism, non-sexism, and upholding the Constitution and the rule of law.
This was brought to you by the GCIS, empowering South Africans through communication excellence.
The government's really taken this whole genocide thing very seriously, are they not? And you see, the one thing that they are failing to understand is that actually, as I said in my video yesterday, genocide are stages. It doesn't just land up in the final solution. There are numerous stages. And if you actually look at the actual definition of genocide, and Genocide Watch specifically says that South Africa is around stage 8 of 10. Pretty close to the final solution. And that's the whole reason that pressure is being put on the South African government to mend its ways. But you know, these guys are just not that smart. They don't really seem to understand the implications of what's occurring. I'll tell you who does understand how to apply political pressure against the government, and that would be AfriForum. Because AfriForum did a rather excellent documentary on the race rules in South Africa and the Kill the Boer chants, farm murders, expropriation act, and so forth and so forth. Anyway, I'm sure you've guessed it. Well, caught the attention of Elon Musk, who retweeted it. Yep. Interesting. Because now South Africa is on the front page of every single news outlet in the world as being a global pariah. And as Elon Musk says himself, he was born in South Africa and the government will not grant Starlink a license to operate simply because he's not black. And this is correct. And Castle themselves have said, must give 30% of your company away to previously disadvantaged individuals, and then we might consider letting you actually have a license. Interesting. Now, where this becomes really interesting is that South Africa is starting to appear on pretty much every podcast going. InfoWars even featured South Africa. Every one of the major podcasters have done it. Ben Shapiro, OtisEaters.com have done it. Like, everybody has featured us. And so the actual pressure that the government is now feeling with the allegations of genocide, it's getting hot in the kitchen. And so at some point in time, Cyril's going to have to make a very difficult decision. And I don't mean difficult position for us. I mean a difficult position for his party. Because what he's actually going to have to do is break with traditional policy. Or double down on it and just go for break, like just go break. Now, the reality is we can look at this in one of two ways. The first is that if Cyril goes against his party's policy and starts adopting forms of centrist and moderate policies, this may be at odds with the SACP and some of the more left-leaning individuals in his party. But it would certainly arrest the decline of the party itself as investor confidence grew. The alternative is that they double down on things and they go from a 40% party to a 30% party to a 25% party, and then the ANC is a footnote in history. So either way, it's going to cause headaches for Cyril Ramaphosa. But for you and me, as Franz Cornier says in his excellent interview, well, for many of us, it's a case of continue to apply pressure on the government, continue to expose what they're doing, and just sit and wait. Because at this point in time, it's a waiting game. Government cannot continue along the path that it has so far because the end is pretty much near for the ANC. Now, all of that may come across as very hopeful. And you, ladies and gentlemen, should listen to all of that and go, well, things actually might not be that bad after all. But one thing I would note is that in the recent by-elections, the ANC has still won 3 wards, with the DA winning their usual Stellenbosch seat. Now, I did look at the data quite a lot, and actually in the 3 wards that the ANC did win, the DA was not up for candidacy. But what's interesting is that the hard left parties, the MK party and the EFF, won nothing. In fact, in some wards, the EFF's getting like 13 votes, which shows you that the EFF as a whole, it's done. It's finished. It's dead. That party is just completely kaput. The party's no more. And I would say, serves you right. But in any case, one does have to ask the question, is the only reason the ANC are winning the other wards because the DA is not actually fielding candidates? Or actually is everything that we've just said wrong and the ANC still holds some sway with the masses? The honest answer, ladies and gentlemen, is I don't know. But do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.